3 a.m. files.
Hello. Tonight we're stepping into apartment 42, a place the neighbors avoid speaking about, especially after dark. Before you settle in, dim the lights, put on your headphones, and let the shadows creep a little closer. If you appreciate the work I put into these stories, please like the video, subscribe to my channel, and leave a comment telling me what time it is right now and where you're tuning in from. Now, let's begin. The Harrington complex was older than the fire codes that pretended to govern it. 6 floors, 1 elevator that coughed its way up the shaft like a dying animal, and a lobby that smelled faintly of coin laundry steam and old paper. At the end of a long corridor on the 6th floor sat apartment 42, tucked into a dim corner where the last ceiling bulb always flickered like an eye trying to stay awake. Lena Rourke signed the lease because the rent was impossible to ignore. The superintendent slid the paperwork across the counter with nicotine-yellowed fingers and said, "No pets, no parties. Garbage chute is to your left." He never once looked her in the eye. Her first day was boxes and a stubborn window that wheezed when it opened. Her second was a tour of the building's strange acoustics, a TV murmuring through a wall with no neighbors on the other side, a pipe that clicked like a metronome inside the bathroom mirror, footsteps on the ceiling even though the 6th floor was the top. The carpet in the hall felt tired, like it remembered everyone who had ever crossed it. On the door to 42, someone had scratched a small X beneath the peephole and then tried to rub it away. You could still feel it with your fingertip. Lena did. Then she turned the key. Inside, bare bulbs, thin paint, a narrow galley kitchen, and a window view of a brick wall 4 feet away. The kind of apartment where the refrigerator made more conversation than your neighbors. She told herself she'd be fine. She liked quiet. That first week, the quiet learned her name. It was the 4th night when Lena woke for no reason at all. You know that instinct, when the body sits up before the brain has anything to say. The red digits of the bedside clock read 3 a.m. exactly. Cold air lay over her like another blanket. Then came the sound. Knock. A full breath of silence. Knock. Another slow breath. Knock. Deliberate, not impatient, not friendly. A rhythm that suggested the knocker already knew she was awake. Lena held still. Her building had the kind of neighbors who left notes about recycling but never learned your name. Maybe someone miscounted doors. Maybe a drunk Uber got the wrong floor. She waited. Nothing else. The quiet climbed back into the room like a cat returning to a windowsill. At 7 a.m., she told herself it had to be a dream. She made coffee. She laughed it off. She went to work. She didn't think about it again until she turned the key that night and felt the apartment breathe out, as if it had been holding something in. Night 5, 3 a.m. 3 slow knocks. Peephole check, empty hallway, flickering light, a hum in the vents. Night 6, 3 a.m., 3 knocks again, the tiniest rasp of wood on skin as if fingertips grazed the door on the last beat. She added the chain. She turned the deadbolt twice. She slid a chair under the handle. She moved a heavy box of books in front for good measure. The apartment looked fortified. She didn't feel safer. By night 7, her sleep braced itself around the hour. She'd drift, then surface, then hold her breath. The clock would climb toward it like a diver swimming up to a bright circle on the surface. 2:58, 2:59. The soft electrical click inside the numbers as they switched to 300. And then, knock, knock, knock. Lena's breath fogged the peephole. The corridor outside was as empty as a photograph. On night 8, she propped her phone against a stack of mail, camera pointed at the door, microphone live. She left the hallway light on. She turned everything else off. She whispered to herself, "This is nothing. You'll catch nothing." And that means it's nothing. Morning. She scrubbed forward to 2:59 a.m. The first thing on the recording was the building's drowned heartbeat, the low HVAC drone. Then something else, so faint she had to slide her speaker against her ear. Breathing, not fast, not excited, slow, measured, like someone practicing to be calm, the kind of breath people take in waiting rooms. 3 knocks, then silence. She listened again, turned the volume up. On the 3rd replay, she heard a word hiding between the knocks, hissed through the audio floor. "Let me in." She threw the phone down like it was hot, then picked it up, rewound, listened again. The same whisper. Not outside the door now, but inside the phone, inside the apartment, inside her head. That evening, she slid a towel along the crack at the base of the door as if sound could be kept out like a draft. In the mailroom the next day, a paper grocery bag tore, and a dozen oranges ran like escapees across the tile. Lena and Mrs. Carmichael, apartment 44, silver hair, iron spine, chased them together. "You're in 42, aren't you?" the old woman said, not as a question. Lena smiled, wary. "I am." Mrs. Carmichael's eyes softened with something that wasn't quite pity. "You've been getting knocks." Lena felt the bottom fall out of the world. She hadn't told anyone. "I used to hear them," Mrs. Carmichael said. "Years ago, back when my husband was alive. We were in apartment 42 for, 6 months, and then we moved across the hall." She looked down at her hands. "He said it was the plumbing, but plumbing doesn't ask to come in. So you moved because Mrs. Talley before us opened the door," she said. "And because the young man after us, what was his name, Ethan, opened it too. And because the super won't tell you this, but the rent for 42 is low for a reason." "What happened to Ethan?" Lena whispered. Mrs. Carmichael lifted a shoulder. "No one saw him again. His toothbrush was still damp." The old woman straightened. "Don't answer it, dear, and don't look too long at the peephole. It looks back. If you're still with me, tap like and tell me what time it is where you are. It helps more than you think." Back to the hallway. Night 10, 2:50 a.m., 10 minutes early. 3 knocks, then 3 more, then 3 more. The rhythm pushed into the room like a tide. Night 11. The knocks drifted, sometimes at 2:42, sometimes at 3:07, always in sets of 3. As if timing was a courtesy the visitor had grown tired of extending. Lena piled heavier things against the door. The microwave, 2 boxes of books, a cast iron pan leaned like a shield. The chair under the handle creaked like a small animal every time the knocks came. The peephole became a strange temptation. Each night she swore she wouldn't look. Each night she stood on her toes, one eye closing, the other pressed to the cold circle of glass like a child peering into a keyhole world. The hallway was always empty, until it wasn't. Night 15. The apartment had that deep 3 a.m. quiet where even the refrigerator held its breath. The first knock arrived like a spoon on a tombstone. Lena pressed her eye to the peephole. She saw herself, same sleep-tangled hair, same old college hoodie, same little scar under the left eyebrow, except the skin at the cheeks looked chilled, like the light had to travel further to reach it, and the eyes, both of them, were a glossy, bottomless black, pupil and iris gone. Her own mouth smiled back at her from the hall. When it opened, the sound slid under the door rather than through it. "Let me in, let me in." Lena stumbled back so hard the chair under the handle skittered sideways. Something on the other side tried the knob, softly at first, then with a steady, patient pressure that made the screws in the strike plate chirp. The deadbolt held, the chain held, the microwave held. Lena did not. She sat on the floor and listened as the knob turned and turned and turned, like a clock hand refusing to be finished with the hour. Then quiet. Utter. She stayed there until the window grayed. Morning. The room looked hungover. Lena stood, legs shaky, and saw them, muddy footprints beginning at the foot of her bed. Left, right, each a half step apart, gently curving toward the door, and stopping at the inside of the threshold. Not from the door in, as if an intruder had entered. From the bed out, as if something had been standing there, watching her sleep, and then decided to leave. She followed the prints. The mud was not quite brown. It had a gray tinge, like the underside of old snow. The last partial heel was right at the door, where the towel she'd stuffed under the crack had been nudged outward, as if by toes. Her stomach turned over. She cleaned the prints, because that was a thing she could do. She scrubbed hard enough to make the linoleum squeak. She showered with the curtain open. She placed a knife on the sink. She left the bathroom light on when she went to bed. That night, the knocks did not come. That was worse. 2 nights of nothing. The quiet had edges now. She caught herself playing the recording just to hear something. On the 3rd night, 2:37 a.m., Lena woke to the sound of the hallway light buzzing too loud. Not louder than usual, louder than possible. She stood at the door and didn't look through the peephole. She pressed her palm to the wood. It felt cold enough to ache. On the far side, something pressed back. She backed away, grabbed her phone, and called the super. The phone rang once, twice, then picked up to hollow, open air. "Mr. Patel?" she said. Silence. Then, faintly, a sound like someone dragging their fingertips across a microphone. The call cut. The apartment felt smaller. At 3:01 a.m., a single knock. Not 3. 1. Everything in the room leaned toward it. The refrigerator, the window, Lena. She told herself she wouldn't look. She looked. Her own eye looked back. Not the whole face, just the eye, pressed so close to the peephole that the world beyond it was iris and black. Then a blink that felt deliberate, like a signal. Lena couldn't move. The eye withdrew. The 3 knocks followed, patient, almost polite. She didn't sleep. When morning finally came, there was a note taped to her door, tucked under the deadbolt so she'd have to touch it. In messy block letters, "Your turn to knock." She tore it, but the words felt heavy as a new key in her pocket. People say don't Google at 3 a.m. People do it anyway. Apartment 42 Harrington Complex tenant missing brought up a blog from 5 years ago. My brother Ethan stopped answering texts. Last seen, Harrington Complex, if you know. The post ended jagged, like the author had been interrupted and never returned. A photo showed a young man in a beanie, a smile that tried to be confident and didn't quite make it. Another result, a forum thread where someone asked, "Peephole illusions? Ever see your own reflection outside your door?" Replies, jokes, memes, one serious comment, "That's a door spirit. Don't look through the lens. It's a little telescope that points both ways." Another, old superstition. If something knocks after midnight in 3s, refuse on the 3s. But if it ever knocks once, it's asking for a trade. She shut the laptop so fast the screen flashed. She paced the apartment until the corners felt worn. She took the chair away from the door because the chair hadn't saved anyone. She put it back because doing nothing felt worse. The clock inched. Evening dragged its black coat over the windows. Night 20. Lena did not lock the door. It wasn't bravery. It was exhaustion that looked like surrender and tasted like iron. She stood 3 steps back, knife on the counter, phone recording again, because she wanted the apartment to be a witness. 2:59. The air thinned like a plane cabin just before the oxygen masks drop. 3 o'clock. The handle turned with no resistance. The door eased inward without a sound because she had oiled the hinges on the second week and then regretted it forever. A shape stood in the doorway. The hallway light behind it framed a familiar outline. Same height, same posture, same little tilt of the head she'd noticed in photographs of herself. "Lena," it said, in her voice from 2 rooms away, like a recording playing through a vent. It stepped over the towel at the threshold. Its feet were clean. It was Lena's face, and not Lena's face. Everything right, with the wrong nested inside like a second face worn under the first. The smile unfolded slowly. "Your turn to knock," it whispered. She could smell it now. Not rot, not cologne, something like cold clay after rain. The knife on the counter looked theatrical. The phone on the mail stack watched without blinking. "What happens if I don't?" Lena heard herself ask, and hated that she sounded curious. The other Lena tilted her head the opposite direction as if reflected in a mirror that had forgotten which side was which. "You already did," it said. "You looked." The thing extended its hand. It was her hand to the knuckle. Beyond that, the wrist blurred a little, like a long exposure photo where the subject moved. Lena reached out because refusing felt like falling, and she was so tired of falling. The hand was cold as glass, not wet, not dry, like touching an idea. The hallway was darker than it should have been, as if the light couldn't squeeze past the shape in the doorway. The other Lena stepped backward, drawing her gently. The door swung wider. Behind her, the apartment breathed in. They crossed the line together. The instant Lena's bare foot touched the hall carpet, it felt wrong, too soft, too thick, like stepping into ash. The bulb above them flared and went out. For a second, there was only the whisper of the building in its bones. Then the other Lena let go. "Knock," it said again, pleasantly, as if suggesting a game. It moved to the far end of the hall and stood by the elevator, hands behind its back like a schoolchild waiting for a turn. Lena turned to her door. It was open on a slice of darkness that contained her life. The rental couch, the thrifted lamp, the stupid towel. The urge to step back inside and slam it shut pulsed behind her eyes. Her knuckles lifted almost without her. She knocked. Knock. 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 The sound traveled into apartment 42 like a stone thrown into a well. Something moved inside the dark, a slow, pleased shifting. The air changed temperature. The floor under her feet felt suddenly steady, like a train pulling into a station. Behind her, the other Lena began to hum. It was an off-key tune Lena recognized with a lurch, a lullaby her mother used to sing. The humming stopped on a note that never belonged to the song. "Good," it said. "Now we can trade." The apartment door began to close, not quickly, not with force, just with certainty, as if doors have their own gravity and hers had finally felt the planet it orbited. Lena reached forward, thinking to arrest it with her palm, to wedge it with her shoulder. She stopped an inch away. The wood radiated a cold that hurt. The gap narrowed to a knife edge. She could see her own phone on the mail stack, its little red recording light like a star in a bad sky. The door clicked, and the building seemed to relax. The other Lena stepped up quietly beside her in the dark. "Thank you," it said, and it sounded almost relieved. "I thought you'd make me ask all month." "What happens now?" Lena asked. A smile close enough to feel pulled the corner of her own mouth. "Now," it said, "you go where I came from." The elevator dinged. It should have been comforting, that ordinary sound. It wasn't. The doors slid open onto nothing, not darkness, nothing. A color her eyes couldn't decide to see. Lena took a step back without meaning to. The hallway behind her didn't offer space. The other Lena guided her forward with 2 fingers at the center of her back, gentle as a nurse. "It's only for a little while," it lied in her voice. "We take turns. That's fair." The elevator doors began to close. Lena did the only disobedient thing she could think of. She turned her head and looked directly into the other Lena's eyes from inches away. Not at the face around them, not at the smile, just the eyes. For a heartbeat, they weren't black. They were deep, with something moving far below, like shadows cast by people passing in a street you can't reach. For that heartbeat, she felt a pressure behind her own eyes, as if something was checking the hinges from the inside. The other Lena blinked. The spell, if it was a spell, shuddered. The elevator doors stopped, reconsidered, then stuttered open again half an inch. A mercy or a glitch. "Don't make this ugly," it said softly, and the softness was worse than anger. Lena ran, not into the elevator, past it, down the hall, past the elevator again because the hallway looped wrong, like a dream that restarts when you reach the end. Her breath came loud. Her feet slapped carpet that didn't give back sound. She reached the stairwell door. It was marked exit in tall white letters that folded themselves into nonsense when she looked too long. She slammed the bar. It didn't move. Behind her, the other Lena's footsteps didn't hurry. They made no sound at all, which was somehow louder than running. Lena slammed the bar again. This time the door moved an inch, then another. Air leaked through, honest, unconditioned air that smelled like concrete and rain. She threw herself into the stairwell. The door began to close. A hand, her hand, caught the edge. The skin darkened to the wrist. She brought the door down hard and felt the crunch in her bones like biting on ice. Silence. Then a soft laugh that traveled through the door like humidity. 7 nights, it said from the other side. I'll knock. The stairwell was lit by a single bulb that had decided not to die just yet. The steps went down and down again as if the building had been designed by a tired god. Lena ran anyway. When she finally reached the lobby, she was crying quietly the way people cry after earthquakes. The night porter's stool was empty. The front doors were locked with the kind of chain you can't plead with. She pounded until her fists hurt. She screamed until her throat went hoarse around the edges. No one came. The city beyond the glass looked the way it always did at 4 a.m. Indifferent. She went back up the stairs because there was nowhere else to go. The 6th-floor hallway waited like a pose held too long. Apartment 42 was closed. She touched the door. It pulsed back, once, like a sleeping animal. Very gently, she bent and slid her phone, still recording, under the door on the towel like a stretcher. The little red light winked at her as it disappeared into the dark. "Keep that for me," she whispered to the wood. "Keep a record. Keep my voice." She pressed her ear to the door and heard nothing. Not the fridge, not the HVAC, not her own breath reflected back. A nothing that matched the elevator. From the elevator shaft, 3 floors down, someone whistled the lullaby again. Off key, wrong. Lena sat with her back to the door until dawn. When the morning traffic began, the building pretended to be ordinary again. A neighbor with a jogger's ponytail trotted past and gave her a quick smile that didn't quite land. The super's office door opened and shut. A delivery guy struggled with a case of water. At 8:13 a.m., the lock on apartment 42 clicked on its own, and the door eased inward 3 inches. Inside, her couch, her lamp, her towel on the floor, no footprints, no phone on the mail stack, the red light gone. Lena reached in slowly and pushed the door wider with 2 fingers. The air that came out smelled like her detergent and something colder. On the kitchen counter, in the middle of an empty space where the knife had been, lay a note. Same messy block letters. "See you tonight." Beneath it, a tiny, perfect X drawn exactly where one had been scratched under the peephole on moving day. The Harrington complex relisted the apartment 42 a month later. The price was generous. The listing said cozy, quiet, great for singles. The superintendent showed the place without making eye contact. A young couple took it. They joked that the number was unlucky. They liked the rent. They liked the window that opened to a brick wall because city views only tempt burglars, right? On their second night, they woke inexplicably. The red digits on their bedside clock burned 3 a.m. into the dark. From the hall came 3 measured knocks. The woman whispered, "Did you invite someone?" The man laughed softly, because that's what men do when they want women not to be afraid. They looked through the peephole together, cheek to cheek. The hallway looked empty. The light at the far end flickered like a tired eye trying to stay awake. They didn't notice the muddy half-moon of a heel print drying by the bed behind them. And somewhere between the door and the bed, the apartment remembered another set of footsteps. and waited for the trade. If you've stayed with me until now, welcome to the Night Crew. Hit like if this story got under your skin and subscribe so you don't miss the next file we open. Drop a comment with the time on your clock and where you're listening from. Now, try to sleep, and if you hear 3 knocks tonight, don't answer.